Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Ever get that feeling like your phone's listening in, yeah? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I swear the other day I was like, maybe I need a new blender. And bam! Suddenly blender ads were everywhere.
Uh-huh, yeah.
It's kind of creepy. Like AI is reading our minds, or at least our digital footprints.
It's a perfect example of how AI is already shaping our lives even in these subtle ways. And as it gets more sophisticated, the question becomes, who's setting the rules? Who's making sure it serves us and not the other way around?
Right. Makes sense. So that's where this EU AI Act comes in. I mean, it's not just about stopping rogue blenders, right?
Exactly. It's about making sure AI benefits humanity,
Yeah.
that it upholds our values and doesn't infringe on our rights.
So is it like the Wild West out there right now? And the EU is like, hold on, everybody. Time for some law and order on the AI frontier.
That's a good way to put it. They're really trying to set some ground rules, establish some guardrails for how AI is developed and used.
And why should anyone care about this, even if they aren't living in the EU?
Because the EU is often a trendsetter in tech regulation. What they do today could easily become the de facto standard globally. Companies want to sell their AI products in the EU. They'll have to comply with these rules, and that could shape how they develop those products for everyone.
So it's like setting a global precedent, even if other countries haven't signed on the dotted line just yet.
Precisely. The EU AI Act could become the rulebook for responsible AI development worldwide.
Okay, so they're definitely taking this seriously. But how does the act actually work? I'm seeing something about risk categories. It sounds like they're rating AI like movies from G to R.
You're on the right track. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. The Act classifies AI systems based on their potential impact on things like fundamental rights. And believe me, some of those categories are a lot scarier than an R rating.
Okay, let's talk about the scariest one then. Unacceptable risk. That sounds pretty intense.
It is. Imagine a government using AI to rank citizens based on their behavior, like some kind of social credit score determining their access to services or even restricting their freedom.
Wow, yeah, that's straight out of a dystopian sci-fi movie.
Exactly. Or AI systems designed to exploit vulnerable groups, like using manipulative algorithms to target children with advertising. The EU is drawing a hard line in the sand, saying these applications are simply unacceptable. No ifs, ands, or buts.
I'm relieved to hear that. So those applications are totally banned. What about the next level down? What falls under high-risk AI?
High-risk AI covers systems used in critical areas that affect our lives and well-being. Things like healthcare, transportation, education, even loan applications. These are high-stakes decisions, and the EU wants to make sure they're made responsibly.
That makes sense. Those areas definitely deserve extra scrutiny. So say a company is developing AI for something like loan applications. What does the EU actually expect them to do differently?
The EU AI Act outlines some key obligations for high-risk AI systems. First and foremost, data quality is absolutely crucial.
Makes sense. These systems are only as good as the information they're trained on, right?
Exactly. If a data is biased, incomplete, or inaccurate, it can lead to unfair or even discriminatory outcomes.
So imagine being denied a loan because of biased data. That's what they're trying to prevent.
Precisely. It's about making sure the AI is fair and impartial from the ground up. And it's not just about the data itself, it's also about transparency.
Transparency, how so?
The app says people have the right to know when a decision that affects them is being made by AI. No more black boxes.
So if I'm applying for a job and they're using AI in the hiring process, they have to tell me that up front.
Exactly. They can't hide it. You have the right to understand how that AI is being used, what factors it considers. Transparency is key for building trust and making sure AI is used ethically.
Okay, I get why this is such a big deal. What else is in this high-risk playbook? What other obligations do companies have?
They also need to have systems in place for human oversight. It doesn't always mean a human has to approve every single decision the AI makes, but it does mean building in safeguards and allowing for human intervention when it's necessary.
So it's like having a safety driver in a self-driving car. They're not steering all the time, but they're there to take over if things start to go off course.
Precisely. It's about finding that balance between leveraging AI's capabilities and preserving human judgment where it matters most.
That makes sense. But how do you determine when human intervention is needed, especially with these complex systems?
That's a great question, and it's something the EU AI Act really grapples with. It's not about micromanaging every AI decision, but it's about establishing clear lines of responsibility and accountability. For example, there might be cases where human review is mandatory, like if a loan application is automatically rejected, the applicant should have the right to know why and potentially have a human review the decision.
So it's about having checks and balances. making sure there's always a way for a human to step in and course correct if needed.
Exactly. It's about striking that balance between what AI can do well and where we still need that human oversight,
Right.
just in case.
Okay, that makes sense. But I have to admit, a part of me was kind of hoping for something a little more
Well,
Hollywood, like those movies where the AI goes rogue and takes over the world.
right. Well, we're not quite at Terminator levels of AI rebellion yet.
Too bad.
But the Act does lay down some hard no-go zones for AI development.
Okay, spill the AIT.
Right.
What does the EU outright ban when it comes to this tech?
One of the biggest no-nos is using AI for indiscriminate surveillance. Like, imagine walking down the street and having your face scanned by cameras with facial recognition technology everywhere you go, all without your knowledge or consent.
So no big brother is watching, at least not with AI's help.
Not if the EU has anything to say about it. They're very concerned about protecting fundamental rights. And that includes the right to privacy and freedom from constant surveillance.
But what about those crime shows where they use facial recognition to catch criminals? Are there any exceptions to that rule?
You're right. It's not always so black and white. The Act does allow for exceptions in specific situations, like if law enforcement needs to use it to prevent serious crimes or apprehend dangerous individuals. But even then, it has to be justified and proportionate. It's always a balancing act between security and freedom.
So no AI-powered security cameras tracking our every move unless there's a really good reason.
You got it. The EU is drawing a line in the sand, making it clear that mass surveillance is a step too far.
Okay, so that's what companies can't do. But what happens if they don't play by the rules? Are we talking like a slap on the wrist, or are there real consequences?
Well, the EU means business.
Yeah.
We're talking hefty fines for noncompliance. Up to 30 million euros, or 6% of a company's global annual turnover, whichever is higher.
6%. Wow. Okay, now those are some numbers that would make even a tech giant sweat.
Exactly. The EU is sending a clear message. Ethical AI is not optional, it's the law. And with those kinds of penalties on the line, companies are paying attention.
So it seems like the EU is really putting its foot down, setting firm boundaries.
Oh.
But does this mean Europe will fall behind in the global AI race? Will all the innovation happen elsewhere while they're busy writing the rule book?
That's a question a lot of people are asking, but the thing is the EU is aware of that concern, and they've actually built mechanisms into the Act to foster innovation within this regulatory framework.
Really? So it's not all just restrictions and penalties?
Not at all. One of the key concepts is this idea of regulatory sandboxes.
Regulatory sandboxes.
Right.
That sounds kind of like a playground for AI developers.
In a way, it is. It's a controlled environment where companies can test out their AI systems, experiment with new approaches, and get feedback from regulators all before they go live in the real world.
So it's like a safety net for innovation. You get to try things out, make mistakes, and learn from them without the risk of massive fines.
Right. Exactly. It's a way to encourage innovation while still making sure it aligns with ethical and legal standards. The EU wants to be at the forefront of AI development, but not at the expense of fundamental rights or responsible innovation.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about the global impact of this act? Will other countries follow the EU's lead?
That's the million-dollar question. The EU AI Act is one of the first comprehensive attempts to regulate AI on a large scale, and it's definitely generating a lot of buzz worldwide.
So we might actually look back at this moment as the beginning of a new era for AI, one where ethics and innovation go hand in hand.
It's definitely a pivotal moment. The world is watching to see how this plays out. Will other countries follow suit and adopt similar regulations, or will they forge their own paths?
It's like they're setting the bar, and everyone else is kind of watching like, let's see how high they can go.
That's a great analogy. And even if other countries don't copy the EU exactly, I think it's going to have a big influence on how they approach AI regulation. We're already seeing similar discussions happening all over the place about data privacy, algorithmic bias, and the need for ethical guidelines. The EU is just kind of pushing these issues to the forefront, making everyone really think about what this technology means.
So a rising tide lifts all boats, as they say. Or in this case, a strong regulatory framework could end up elevating AI development globally.
Hopefully, that's the idea.
Yeah.
It shows that regulation doesn't have to stifle innovation. It can actually help guide it in a direction that benefits everyone, make sure AI is a force for good.
And that brings us back to you, dear listener. We started this deep dive with a pretty big question. Who gets to set the rules for AI? And as we've seen, the answer is, it's complicated. It's not just governments or corporations, it's all of us.
It's about staying informed, asking the tough questions, demanding transparency, and really thinking critically about how AI is being used and how it might impact our future.
So the next time you bump into AI in your daily life, whether it's a personalized recommendation on Spotify or a chatbot answering your customer service questions,
or even just a weirdly well-timed ad. Take a second to think about the bigger picture. What are the implications of this technology? Who's making the decisions behind it? And what kind of future do we want to build with it?
Because that future is not set in stone. It's being written right now,
Hmm.
and we all have a say in how it turns out.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder all the possibilities. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world around you.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.